There's something that every gaming consumer has had to deal with since they first picked up a controller, and that is paying to play a game. From tossing in a quarter to play Pac-Man at an arcade to paying over $90 to own the latest Call of Duty game, we are all familiar that there's a price to pay to be able to play video games. The concept of not having to pay for a game is fairly new, although it has been done in the past with overwhelming success. But just how successful is it today, and how do these games compare to their paid counterparts? We're going to look into a little bit of the history of these free-to-play games and see whether or not they are truly better than today's paid games. We're starting with the arcade games, and if you weren't around for the popularity of these, then you missed out on quite a fun experience. These games were made for pretty much everybody, and weren't just pay to win, they were pay to play. With the end of every game, you had to give the machine more money to play again, and if you weren't good, your turn was over pretty fast. But if you were good, you had a crowd of people that built around you just to see how far you could make it into the game, and then celebrate a new high score together. These days were cut short with the introduction of home consoles in the 80s and 90s. This brought the introduction to paid games, where you could just buy the game once and play it as much as you want instead of spending all of your lunch money on arcade games. Arcades effectively died out, and the so-called pay-to-win model went into hiding for about 2 decades, needing free-to-play games and piracy to revive it. There was one game, however, that attempted the free-to-play model early on, and this game was Doom in 1993. The developers of Doom gave it the start of their game for free to get it in as many people's hands as possible, and gave them the option to pay to unlock the rest of the game if they chose to. This led to the game having more installs on computers worldwide than Microsoft's then new operating system, Windows 95. This was a high-risk, high-reward system which obviously paid off. Several years later, they released Doom 2 for $40, straying away from what made their first game a global success. Long story short, this didn't work out, and the company slowly fell apart. This made the free-to-play model disappear from the Western world up until the release of League of Legends about a decade and a half later. One massive thing that I wait to mention at this point in the video is piracy. Not only was this rampant in the other side of the world, mainly in Asia, but it also had a massive impact on what games are like today. Because there were no laws in most of Asia about piracy, 80 to 90% of all entertainment and software were pirated. This forced game developers to get extremely creative and innovative with their games.
Why should I sail with any of you? 4 of you have tried to kill me in the past, 1 of you succeeded.
Because of their piracy problems, most games released in this area were free to play, which led to the eventual installment of loot boxes by a company named Nexon. This was a Korean company and released the first digital free-to-play game called Quiz Quiz in 1999. This MMO led Nexon to finally figure out how to monetize games in Asia. They followed this game up with MapleStory, which was the first pay-to-win game that featured the first loot boxes. Ever since these games, Asia started producing tons of free-to-play games, raking in tons of cash, and eventually caught the attention of the Riot Games founders. They decided that they wanted to release League of Legends as a free-to-play game. We all know just how popular this game is today, but it started the path to pay-to-win games and the ever-present loot boxes in almost every game we see today. Since the success of League, companies started looking for various ways to milk more money out of their customers' pockets with the free-to-play model.
So the tricks on how to monetize a game well, you sell convenience to the achievers, which really means faster progress, customization to socializers, hats and stuff, competitive advantage, that is pay to win for the killers, and content for explorers. Absolutely do not want to tell them that the majority of people in your game never spend money. That's poison. Never tell them that. Make sure that your games aren't too skill-based.
Most companies have adopted these strategies and turned a lot of their games into pay-to-win, with paid games even taking this approach as well. They not only want you to pay to play, they also want you to keep paying. They might as well start throwing those big arcade games into your house and come by weekly to collect all the money you put in to play it. And not only did they include paying for cosmetics, they introduced this model for full-on progression systems. Think of EA here, for example, with pretty much any of their sports games.
This is sickening. It's absolutely sickening. How long can this go on?
Now that we know most of the history of these free-to-play games and just how they came to be what they are today, do we really know if they're better than paid games? Well, first, we're going to leave out mobile games here because that feels like an entirely different category that we could talk about. To quickly sum that up, there are often way too many ads on free games on mobile, which basically ruins all of those games. Paid games win there. As for console and PC games, we need to look at some pros and cons. There are no 100% accurate arguments here due to the variety of games offered, but we will look at more general points here. The first obvious distinction here is that free games are, well, free. This allows more players to access these games, giving developers more of a chance to retain those players and get their money from in-game purchases. On the other side of the argument, paid games often offer a more polished, immersive experience including better graphics, sound design, gameplay mechanics, and overall production value. While this isn't 100% true, it is often the case when comparing the two. Look at a couple examples like Fortnite and Apex Legends. These are some of the most popular games in the world, or at least they have been at some point, and there are still many people refusing to play them because they look too cartoonish and unrealistic. Many paid games often promote the realistic mechanics, which grabs the attention of these kinds of people, which just shows how any one game is never for everyone, despite what the ratings might say. One note here for PC gamers is that paid games that offer these high quality games often need high-end specs for your PC, which means spending even more money just to play these games if your PC requires an upgrade. Another pro in favor of free games is that they often provide a space for casual, undemanding players. These gamers may typically be those with 9-to-5 jobs who don't want to spend their hard-earned money on games, and are dedicated fans to free-to-play titles like Dota 2 or Fortnite, and don't need anything else to have fun. Not only do free games benefit casual gamers, they offer new gamers a chance to find out what kinds of games they like without emptying their wallet. Turning over to favor the paid game side, these games often offer more content and support from developers. Although many games these days are released in an unfinished and buggy state, these games often get fixed up and loaded with additional content over its lifespan. Look at Battlefield 2042 for example. This game was basically unplayable at launch, but today, although 3 years later, many Battlefield fans are huge supporters of the game thanks to the major updates and additional content. While it is hard to compare both free-to-play and paid games given the improvements on free games over the years, there are obvious arguments for both sides. I'm obviously siding with free games here, as my recent experiences with paid games have been horrible, with the most recent release of Call of Duty and EA games never getting any better. Personally, I believe free games have just been the better games in general, with the ever-growing storyline and content updates in Fortnite, my rejuvenated interest in Halo, and the fact that the top 5 most played games on Steam currently are all free-to-play. Backing up my claim that free-to-play games are now the better games to play is an online in-depth analysis of the world's top 10 most famous online games, considering their impact, gameplay, and the communities that have grown around them. Out of this top 10 list, only 3 games are paid, one of which is only $5 and another being free to play up until the player is level 20. I believe that this clearly shows that free games are taking over the industry, but I'm going to leave it at that for now. Let me know what you think about paid versus free games, and whether you believe all games should cost something, or if all games should be available for free to anyone. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and until next time, I'm out.